Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to class. Today we are going to talk about Indian English. You can see a switch from English in India to Indian English. We talked about English in India in some other video on a long detailing, the tracing the history of English in India and some significant milestones in consolidation of English as one of the languages of this Indian ecology, linguistic ecology of India. Today we are going to talk about Indian English. And when we say Indian English, we are talking about a distinct, unique, customized, and culturally rooted variety of English, which can be distinguished, identified, and noticed from all other speakers of English in the world. We call it Indian English, and a number of works like Agnihotri, Mistry, Singh, Rajendra Singh, B. Kachru, Rakesh Bhatt, Sridhar, Tej Bhatia, and so many other people who have worked in English and Indian English, world Englishes they talk about. So we look at it as and now as an independent variety. So this is not considered subordinate of or the perverted variety of the original English. There is nothing called pure language. There is nothing called the English. If you look at the world and if you look at the works by Kachru, now we are talking about Englishes. Which English is the real English? English is not spoken in a similar way even in Great Britain. Go to Scotland, go to Ireland, in England, and within England, different parts. We have dialectal variations and different varieties of English are spoken. So, Indian English is one of the varieties of English. It has emerged now over almost like 3 centuries. It entered India, it came to India as a language of traders and merchants. But today, it has acquired a position of a very consolidated and higher position in the entire Indian linguistic ecology. So this journey of English in India is commendable and incredible. Today we are going to talk about Indian English, though in one lecture we cannot cover all the aspects of it. So in this lecture I am not going to cover the grammatical properties of Indian English. Possibly we'll talk about it when we talk about English teaching in India. But today we'll talk about a very generic view. We'll have a very generic view and talk about some important, representations on different public, spheres of Indian English. This is the summary of the class today. We have already discussed the journey of English in India in our other class. But just to recapitulate what we did, we'll quickly go over it and start with our main focus in this talk. So, undoubtedly, English occupies a very significant space and offers economic, social, and political advantages to the speakers in India who speak English. It symbolizes uh, a reflection of modernity, higher social prestige, and believed to be instrumental in upward social mobility in India. That's the position and power of English in India. English occupies a very large political space, dominating all other languages in this linguistic ecology. Uh, some groundbreaking works have been done by linguists like Braj Kachru, linguists like Rakesh Bhatt, linguists like Ramakant Agnihotri, A.L. Khanna, and so many other people. Agnihotri and Khanna, 1997, they conclude that in their extensive survey that they conducted, the needs of globalization and the market economy are such that every child requires learning English, and subsequent development in educational policy prove them right in finding that more than 75% of the states in Indian Union have made learning English compulsory from class 1. Agnihotri 2007. Mind you, the Knowledge Commission of India, or the Indian Knowledge Commission, chaired by Sam Pitroda, recommended introduction of English from class 1 across the country, with a belief that by the time a particular student completes 12 years of schooling, the student will have two languages uh, at his or her disposal, to command on two languages, a regional language or an Indian language to connect with the local community, and an international language called English to connect with the global community and be part of the global order. And the deductions by Agnihotri 2007 just underlines that when he finds that more than 75% of the schools in India, right, have made learning English compulsory from class 1, and this number has grown further. We are inching towards 100%. Thus, we see that English, though not acquired as first language, is emphatically present and negotiating with other Indian languages as dominant partner. And if you look at the corpus planning and if you look at the acquisition planning, English occupies a very central position in that, and refer to two language policies and the third just introduced in 2020, right? So if you look at the education policy of 1968 that adopted the Kothari Commission's report of 1966 trilingual formula, where English was one of the languages in the three language formula, one regional language, Hindi, and English. That was replicated and adopted verbatim without any change and deviation in education policy of 1986. And then what we see in NEP 2020, National Education Policy, there is hardly any deviation from three language formula. And this also endorses the view that out of the three, two must be native to India, and one language is, of course, international language, English. So, throughout these policy frameworks, we see the position of English getting consolidated. That whole idea started in 1823, grounded in 1835 by Macaulay's Minutes, and NEP 2020. English continues to occupy a very significant position in our policies and framework, language policies and linguistic framework. So, if you look at the reports published by the National University, of Education Planning and Administration (HRD), Human Resource Development Ministry, Government of India, the data procured from 14.5 lakh schools spread over 662 districts across states and union territories, and it reveals that number one, While overall enrollment in schools went up just by 7.5% between 2008 and 9 and 2013 and 14, and enrollment in Hindi medium schools went up by about 25%. Enrollment in English medium schools almost doubled in the same period. Interestingly, the highest growth in English medium enrollment was in the Hindi speaking states. It was highest in Bihar, where it grew 47 times, while Hindi medium enrollment grew only by 18 points. In Uttar Pradesh, which is another major Hindi speaking state, English medium enrollment grew 10 times by over 1000% compared to its 11% in the Hindi medium enrollment. And in other Hindi speaking states too, English medium enrollment grew massively. For example, Haryana 5 to 5%, Jharkhand 458%, Rajasthan 209%. And you can imagine the spread and penetration of English in our linguistic ecology and education system. The highest proportion of English medium enrollment was in Jammu and Kashmir, where almost all students are in English medium schools. In northeastern states like Nagaland, Sikkim, and Manipur, the share of English medium school is above 80 and 90%. In Kerala and Delhi, nearly half of the enrollment is in English medium schools. Other states where English medium has a significant share are Andhra Pradesh 44%, Tamil Nadu 41%, and Himachal 30%. You can see the primacy and the space occupied by English in our education system. And look at the aspiration of people who look up to English as their social upward mobility, where English captures their socio political development and imaginations. That's the role of English in India, and it is growing every day. And rest is the history. We all understand that English has a dominant presence in administration, in governance, in parliamentary proceedings, in our judiciary, in science and technology, in trade and commerce, and also English emerges as a link language between Hindi and non-Hindi states. That is another interesting factor. Now, look at the uh, customization factor that I am talking about. If you look at the Indian linguistic ecology, we have already discussed that the diversity and linguistic diversity and cultural diversity of Indian society is phenomenal, and it's rare to find in rest of the world such a great variety of languages and cultures and societies. Um, then we do understand that English spoken as second language of most of the educated Indians will not be the same, because we will have uh, a local negotiation between a regional language and English. For example, Tamil and English, Telugu and English, Kannada and English, Punjabi and English, Gujarati and English, Bangla and English, Hindi and English, for example. So we have this hybrid nature, highly localized, and we find varieties of Indian English as well. So we do not have a standard Indian English, because we have a lot of hybridity and mixing that comes from the regional local languages in English. So it's very difficult to have one national format for English. It is also very diverse, you know, translating the diverse in linguistic diversity of India. But it captures the creative imagination of popular culture, and and we find a lot of experimental creativity and hybridity in English as well. And now what we see post 1991, when the India opened its frontiers for global order and a new wave of liberalization and globalization started in India, we see a very uh, frequent and consistent interaction with the outer world. They spread, and exponential spread is phenomenal, and that allowed English to further settle deep in this linguistic ecology. Uh, you know, revolution in IT and digital technology has ensured presence of English in all walks of our life, and you don't have to be literate anymore to have a small pie of English in your verbal repertoire. The technology has ensured this. Uh, Look at the writers, and we can see the uh, you know format form and form that is approved by the users, the variety that is approved by its users, and how users are deriving pleasure and pride out of it is reflected in the published sources. So, in media, in print media, in books, in journals, in news broadcast, in television broadcast, and now in serious documents of administration, we see this variety, uh, you know, largely accepted, and we do not have any inhibition about declaring the arrival of Indian English to the world. And if you look at the creative writers, they are experimenting like never before. So we see the shedding of inhibitions of using typical Indian expressions in Indian writing without any sense of apology by Indian writers. And they are employing such expressions in the text to give a nativized flavor to the language. They are creating characters, plots, storylines to address the Indian audience and make it indigenized and Indianized. The texts in English are rooted in Indian socio-cultural space where the characters and events represent multilingual and multicultural background of the environment. And D'Souza 2001 captures this development when he observes that they borrow it and recreate, stretch, extend, control, and indigenize. D'Souza 2011. So now we have accepted, customized, and assimilated English, which used to be a foreign language, in our own multilingual fold. And we own it, we experiment, right? And we encode our socio cultural and popular culture imaginations to it. Now, it occupies, as I told you, a very significant position, right? But it is imperative to note that Indian English is not one variety but a composite of many variations based on religion, culture, competence, and regions. So we do not have a single form of Indian English variety. It negotiates with all languages, right? In all Indian languages. So Tamil English, Punjabi English, Gujarati English, Bangla English, Hindi English. So we have these negotiations, right? Where you have the flavor and the mixing of these languages into English, and it's an evolutionary process. So overall, the media has ensured that a definite form with certain definite characters is emerging, and what we call it Indian English. It cuts across the region, religion, community, and language boundaries. Uh, the rest is the history. I won't go into details. Let's move on. Indian English writing. Why I'm particular about it? I am particular about is that uh, given our linguistic attitude, oral variety may be considered dynamic, informal, and always in a flux. But when we see the similar variety, the same variety in print, it makes a difference. It's a big claim. So, Indian writers have adopted English, customized it to suit the Indian audience, and they ground their characters, plots, storylines in the socio-cultural space of India. And that makes the Indian variety of English or Indian English unique and identifiable. There are some examples from some of the texts, and you can find thousands of such examples in hundreds of writers who are writing in English, and they're all writing in Indian English for Indian audience for mass consumption, and we find a definite form emerging out of it. Do you think your father would allow such comings and goings on here? Reduplication and echo words, plenty of reduplication and echo words present in Indian English, which is not a fair, unmarked feature of English, standard English, what we call RP, that we refer to in India, received pronunciation from British. So this is not a standard expression, but as an Indian reader, I can relate to it. I relate to it and understand it. It captures my imagination, right? Yet another example, all over India, people hearing the Indian name announced in Pakka British accent laughed and laughed so hard their stomachs hurt. Right? From the Inheritance of Loss, page 47. Now look at this structure, syntactic structure of this language, of this sentence. And it depicts a typical, Hindi structure. The letters are in Roman, the words are English, but the spirit of the sentence is pure Indian and pertains to any other Indian language, though it is an English sentence. Yet another example from Fire on the Mountain, page 90. Nanda Kaul poured out another and another cup of tea. Reduplication, right? It's a common feature of Indian English. We'll talk about grammatical features of Indian English and English language teaching in India in a separate video. But look at this poem by Nissim Ezekiel, and he names it Indian English writing poetry. He names it typical, very Indian poem in Indian English. Interesting to read, right? I will just recite it for you. I am standing for peace and non-violence. Why world is fighting? Why all people of world are not following Mahatma Gandhi? I am not simply understanding. Ancient Indian wisdom is 100% correct. I should say even 200% correct. But modern generation is neglecting, too much going for fashion and foreign thing. This is not a parody in English, but an unapologetic declaration of arrival of a new variety far away from elitism and snobbery of being clone of the British English. So we have owned it, we have claimed it, and now we are encoding our popular culture imagination, social and political imaginations in this language. What is this language? Is it standard English? Is it a perverted version of English? We have got out of that snobbery and now we claim it to be Indian English. Now, media and digital technologies have added fuel to the spread and acceptability of this English in India. And we are no more very apologetic and shy about using it the way we want to use it. The expansion of English in Indian linguistic ecology is fueled by the revolution in information and technology. Today, we have mobiles. We are texting each other, we are receiving messages, we are receiving calls, notifications. Technology has enabled us to learn English, and now majority of the tech users, mobile users in India, who are not even literate, who cannot read English, are able to understand. The programs aired on radio, the programs on television. Look at the entry of Hollywood films to Indian audience, right? And there are so many other platforms. Internet has become a very fertile ground for English to flourish in Indian linguistic ecology. The other Indian languages are also capturing a space on the internet, but no doubt English remains the dominant partner in this technological development. And the growing footprints of the new media technology is consolidating the Indian English in a big way, where the dominant Indian language with a huge speech community are mixing with English with their hands down, as Harsh Trivedi puts it, hands down, the term he puts for this Hindi English mixing, where Hindi accepts all these mixings and changes hands down, and English dominates in this engagement and negotiation. If you look at the Indian linguistic landscape and the sites of English use in public space, we find it all over, dominantly present. And all signboards, billboards, go to your local area and market and bazaars. Even if you are a Tamil speaker, you'll find an English signage and a board for a smallest shop in the corner. That is the power of English. So they are also in Tamil, they are also in Kannada, they are also in Hindi. But the dominance, if you look at the billboards and the signs, right, even a small hairdressing salon, or maybe a vegetable shop, or maybe a small departmental store, look at the signboards. English is so dominantly present there, despite the fact that there are other languages also present in the public space. English occupies the major space there. All signboards, billboards, commercial spaces, public notice, appeals, warnings, newspaper advertisements, pamphlets, flyers, leaflets, graffiti, everywhere you find the share of English is much bigger than the share of any other regional language in that locality. Virtual domains, all the social media sites, all the digital platforms that you can imagine, and they are present, all multimedia platforms and internet. So be it a physical space, be it virtual space, physical domain or virtual domain, English is present emphatically. English is there very visibly, and English has become, Indian English has become a unique variety, right? Not a perverted one. It has its own linguistic characters, it has own social linguistic characters, it has own variability, it has own variations. But it's there, it's present, and dominantly negotiating with other Indian languages in our education, in our administration, in our governance, in our documentation, and overall in our popular culture and experiences. English remains central as a language, and we call it Indian English with all its linguistic and social linguistic characteristics. We'll continue our discussion on Indian English and its grammatical features when we talk about English language teaching in our next video. This is it for now. Thank you very much.